Alright guys, tonight for your face balls, what I've got here is a little battle, a little comparison, something that I'm going to call the knife strife. So what we're looking at here is I would say a pretty popular knife as of late here. This is the new or newer Spyderco Native Chief. And this guy here is the Manly Peak. Um, so I just thought that these two were a really good comparison. They share a lot of similarities between the two of them. And yeah, let's get into it. So, what we're looking at here is overall dimensions on the Chief. We're looking at just over 9 inches. We actually are 9 and a 16th. We got a blade of 4 and a 16th, 4 and a 16th of an inch, and a handle exactly at 5 inches. Down here on the Manly Peak, we're looking at an overall dimension here of 8 and 11 sixteenths. We've got a blade of 3 and 13 sixteenths and a handle of 4 and 7 eighths. So, overall dimension, actually we'll go this direction here. You can see that the Chief is just slightly bigger than the Peak. However, they have an almost identical usable cutting surface or cutting edge here. The Chief has a cutting length of 3 and 5/8 of an inch, and the Peak, believe it or not, is just slightly longer at 3 and 11 sixteenths. Now that's measuring just the straight line. If you measure the belly, you actually end up the Peak is a little bit longer still. So you can see here that we've got two differently shaped blades. You've got the kind of Spyderco leaf style or maybe spear style blade. I think a lot of people refer to it as a leaf style. But you know what you've got is just a really nice kind of consistent belly throughout the knife. It's a really usable blade shape. It works well. And here on the Native Chief, it's definitely a good user. And on the Peak, you've got a really nice utility style blade here with the pretty considerable amount of flat, and you've got a nice belly here, and both are pretty aggressive at the tip. So you can see here they're both relatively thin out at the tip. So although both of these knives I would say are just really good utility blades, they're both pretty delicate out at the tip. I wouldn't say either one of these are really hard use knives. Both of these I think are made to just be really good slicers. So on the Native Chief here, we're looking at standard Spyderco. This one is made in Golden, Colorado. And this one here is in CPM S30V, which I think right at the moment this is the only blade steel option they offer. And of course, we're looking at G10 handle scales here. And we've got the standard three screw with the lanyard hole spoon style pocket clip. On the Manly Peak, we've got 12C27 blade steel on this model, although there are a couple of different options. We'll get into that. Handle scales here are also G10, but you can see this one here is a couple of different colors. You got the green and then the black G10. This does come in many different colors, so you can check out their website for that. Pocket clip is a full deep carry, kind of a spoon style I would say, but a really functional pocket clip. One of the major differences, I guess if you want to consider it to be major, is on the Manly you have tip up only carry for right or left side. On the Chief you have a 4-way reversible pocket clip. So you know, if you like tip down, then the Chief is going to be your jam. Both knives are backlocks, and both knives use, well, so on this knife here you got the ever popular Spidey hole, and then I guess you know, depending on which crowd you're in, you have the ever popular manly hole. So, as you can see here, and I'll show you, on the Spyderco, you're talking an actual round hole, and on the manly, it's kind of an oval shaped hole. So I'm assuming that's how they, get around patent infringement and that sort of thing. But both work extremely well, and the manly is also a mid back lock, and both knives are riding on phosphor bronze washers, and they're very, very similar in just about every single way. Really, the only difference in these knives that I can see, honestly, is the forward choil. On the Spyderco, you've got this forward finger choil. You've got some jimping up here on the top of the spine, and it's comfortable in that forward grip area. It's also really comfortable when you choke back on the knife. It is a very large handle, but very usable. You do have kind of this area here where it forces you to, kind of forces your grip into one location, but it is comfortable. It is usable. The pocket clip is hidden pretty well in the palm of your hand. You can feel it, but it's not too obtrusive. The manly, on the other hand, is a very, very neutral grip. You can move around on this grip kind of wherever you would like. There is some really effective jimping up here at the front. This is stainless steel liners in here, and which I can show that off. I'm not actually going to do any disassembly on this knife just because in the interest of time, but hopefully you can see those liners down in there. And yeah, there are full nested liners here. Sorry, my lights, let me turn it down here. Kind of washing the camera out, but anyway, construction is very, very similar on these two. The way the backlock works is identical. Really, the only main difference here is the fact that the manly has got the nested liners, where on the Chief you have no liners at all. You just have the G10 slabs or scales, and then you have got the steel that makes up the backlock assembly. Fit and finish on both these knives, definitely the Spyderco fit and finish is a little bit nicer across the backlock here and down the back. This is all really flush across here. It's just nicely done. The manly's also a nice knife, but it's just fit and finish is just not quite as nice. Now, that doesn't make me like the manly any less, but when you feel it, these surfaces back here are not totally flush. Nothing sharp or uncomfortable. It's just, there was a little more attention paid to the fit and finish here on the Spyderco. Weight on these guys. Hold on just a second. I actually forgot my scale. There we go. So, be prepared, right, guys? Let's see what we're working with here. So, these two knives are so similar on so many fronts. It's pretty interesting, but let's go with the manly first. Now again, so we're looking at just over 4 ounces, basically 4 ounces. And then the Chief, 3.9. Actually, I think that's, I don't know if I've got, let me set that down here if that's not a good enough base to put that on. Okay, so we got the 4.031. Yeah, so really we're very, very similar in weight. The Native Chief is just slightly less. But you can feel it a little bit. The manly feels slightly heavier, and it's solely because of the liners for sure. But to look at the knife in the closed position, Both knives are very similar. Uh, the Spyderco is just over an inch and a half in this dimension, where the Manly, you do have this area here where the Manly hole is, but it's just under an inch and a half. There's not quite. I think it's a just over an eighth of an inch difference. So you can see here, or just under, I should say, an eighth of an inch. But they're really similar, and the Manly feels a little smaller in pocket, but because I don't know if it's just because the Spyderco footprint is just a little bit larger, it makes it seem a little bit lighter. I mean, it is technically a little bit lighter. I actually thought it was going to be a bigger difference than what it was. Um, but both of them in the pocket are really good. There is quite a difference in the pocket clip. You can see, you're going to have roughly that much knife sticking out of your pocket, where on the Manly, it's a total deep carry clip. So if deep carry is your jam, then the Manly Peak is going to be for you. Um, things like blade centering, both of them are pretty good. They're not perfectly centered, but they're both off about the exact same. They both favor, as we're looking at it here, they both favor the right side slightly. Uh, but that's, I can deal with that. And like I said, both backlocks, action on both is almost identical. Um, you know, I can, it's hard to do on camera, but I can use the Spidey hole. You do have to use some wrist to get both of them out. Yeah, it's both of them are very similar in that regard. So action, you know, if you do call it action with the backlock, they're both very very similar. One of the things that is different is the blade. So the Manly, I would say, is all about performance, and I would say the Chief is as well. But the blade stock on these two guys, this is where things start to differ a little bit. So on the Manly, you're looking at 110 thousandths or 3/32 of an inch blade stock, and on the Spyderco, you're looking at eighth inch, so 125 thousandths. And if you can tell, the Spyderco is just a little bit thicker blade stock, and then both are flat ground, and they're both full flat grinds. However, on the Manly, you've got a behind the edge thickness that is consistent the entire way of 12 thousandths. Now they actually advertise 10 thousandths on this knife, so mine's not quite that good, but it's definitely super thin behind the edge. And although the Chief is a really great slicer, it's not quite that good. So behind the edge thickness on the Chief, you're looking at 20 thousandths all the way across. So again, it's a good slicer, but the Peak certainly wins in that battle. If we're talking just about how well does it cut, the Chief, or I'm sorry, the Peak is definitely the better slicer. So, the weight, the size, obviously, the Chief is the larger of the two. It's also just ever so slightly lighter weight. The Peak is probably a little bit stronger due to the fact that it does have the full nested liners. But I'm not concerned at all with the Spyderco. It's going to be a good knife for sure. You do have a few options here as far as choking up and choking back and that sort of thing, but both are really really comfortable in the hand. The Manly, that really neutral grip, and then you also have this thumb ramp here, which there is no jimping on the thumb ramp, but it is functional and it works really well. It's a confidence inspiring grip for sure. When you get a hold of the Peak, feel like you got a tool that can really get shit done. And same thing with the Chief. The Chief's a really great user as well. So overall, I'm pretty happy with both of these knives. Probably the biggest difference in these two guys is the price. So what we're looking at here with the Spyderco, you're looking at $156. That's just as I'm filming this. That was just looking it up on a few different websites and retailers. Seems like everybody's got the same price, $156. On the Manly, the only place I'm aware of that you can purchase these, or at least where I purchased this one, was from Manly USA, or Manly Knives USA, I think. Um, this particular one, like I said, is in 12C27 blade steel, but they do have some other options. You can get it in D2, you can also get it in S90V. So, uh, depending on the handle colors, the handle choices, they're all G10, but there's lots of different colors. You can get camouflage and all kinds of different things. Depending on the handle scales and the blade steel, they range in price anywhere from $52 up to right at $100, $99.99 is what I saw on their website when I looked just before filming this. So, you know, S90V obviously is um, a completely different animal from either one of these, being S30V or 12C27. I think we can certainly make the argument that the S30V is a nicer blade steel than the 12C27. Although I'm not disappointed with 12C27. It performs extremely well, especially when you grind it like this. So, guys, if you're looking for a really great user knife, something you're just going to beat up at work and you don't want to care about, honestly, this guy right here for, just over $50 is a fantastic knife. It does a great job. It's super comfortable. Action is great for a backlock knife. Manly hole works perfectly. Action is every bit as good as the Spyderco, and it literally is a third the price. So, that's and Manly also has sales quite often, so you can pick these up even less. I don't know exactly what their sales are, but I think they do like 10 or 15, maybe even 20% off from time to time. There might even be a sale coming up here for Labor Day. It seems like they kind of do that on holiday weekends. But anyway, if you're looking for just a really great user knife and you don't want to spend the money on the Native Chief, this is a great option, man, especially for the money. Like I said, you can spend up to $100 and get S90V, but and that would even be a great option, compared to the Chief. The Native Chief, I'm not trying to discount it. I think it's a great knife. I'm just looking at the value here and which one makes more sense for the money. And although these knives are very, very similar, I have to give the performance advantage to the Peak just because of that impressive blade grind. It's just an absolute laser beam. And I like the Chief a lot. It's a great knife. But yeah, the Peak is really, really where it's at. So, if you absolutely have to have the Spyderco, then by all means, I think it's a great choice. But if you're really just looking for a good performer, the Peak is really hard to beat. So anyway, guys, I will wrap this thing up here. And yeah, thanks a lot for watching, and we will talk to you next time. Thanks, and have a good night.